You treat me like you're Ike Turner, Jane said. He swung a frying pan at Cassie's head. He dangled her friend off a 17th floor balcony. Drugs, sex trafficking, bribery, kidnapping, arson. And as the prosecution now nears its end, there's one question that remains. Will he finally be held accountable? Well, today we unpack the darkest allegations, and by the end, you won't be left wondering. Welcome to Women of Impact. A world-renowned criminal behavioral analyst, she's made a career out of exposing coercive control. In a case like Diddy's, her insights aren't just valuable, they're essential. Welcome, my co-host to this very special series, Laura Richards. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be back, and I think it's really important today to go through the elements of RICO, racketeering and criminal enterprise, because I think this is it's the most serious charge against Sean Combs. It carries a life sentence. And there also are 8 predicate offences, which we've heard various witnesses give testimony about. And I feel that people don't really understand this component. So if we can go through racketeering and criminal enterprise plus those 8 predicate offences underneath it, then I think it's going to really help people understand what this case is about. And Keith Raniere is a real example. A very similar blueprint was used to prosecute him. He was the head of NXIVM. So he was charged and convicted of racketeering, of sex trafficking and bribery and obstruction of justice. He got 120 years. And then on the other side of it, there's R. Kelly. And so the blueprint's already there. So let's get into it.
All right, so we're going to be talking about all of the allegations, the sex trafficking, the bribery, the forced labor. And I love the idea of using other cases that have the blueprint so we can really understand what's happening with the Diddy case. So now joining us is a woman who didn't just study manipulation, she survived it. After years inside one of the most notorious modern cults, NXIVM, she knows firsthand how power can be weaponized and how charisma can be a trap. No one is more qualified to expose Diddy's playbook of control. Welcome, Sarah Edmondson.
Thank you so much for having me. The first similarity I see is something that was actually mentioned in the vow that Mark Vicente said, which is that nobody joins a cult on purpose. Just like nobody signs up to be abused by their partner on purpose. It's something that happens slowly over time. And the beginning phase is always such a beautiful stage. When you read my book or you hear me talking about NXIVM, I was brought into something that, had it been what it was supposed to have been, would have been great. Just like Cassie signing up to get a record deal. And she had her dreams dangled in front of her, just as I did. And many people who join NXIVM, they don't sign up for a cult or something abusive or something coercive. Ironically, Keith Raniere taught us a lot of things in NXIVM, and what he called it, we didn't realize it was being done to us, was called line bending. Bending the line slowly over time. You don't notice that the line is bending. And you say yes to one more little thing, one more little thing, one more little thing. Next thing you know, it's such an overused and possibly incorrect metaphor, but the frog in the pot of water. So the foundational beginnings for everybody is there's a promise, there's the grooming, there's the excitement, there's the good stuff right at the beginning that really hooks you. And I certainly was hooked, and I can see that for his victims as well.
And you thought you were really joining a self-help group, right? I remember talking to you about this. There were some very positive things, right? And I think this is where it's important for people to understand that abusers aren't abusive all of the time, and they do blur the lines, and they load the language once you're in the ecosystem to make it look like you're the odd one out. And when it's all around you, like water, as a fish in water, you then start to norm to the environment as well. So I think, it's really important for people to understand we're looking in from the outside, but you were in it and wanting to reach the goals that they were setting. And you were doing that for 12 years. That's a long period of time, isn't it, for you to stay in it, thinking that this was a force for good?
Absolutely. When I joined, I was more enamored by and attracted to, not sexually, but as a filmmaker, was Mark Vicente. He's the one who brought me in. I loved his film, What the Bleep Do We Know? That was something I think that Keith knew. He got powerful, important, valuable people to be the face of the organization and to bring people in that way. So that's just one thing that I wanted to point out.
Actually, that's one of the things that we've noticed in the Diddy case. So we have mentioned over and over and over, the name that has come up over again is KK. To your point, Sarah, is that it's everyone around him. So if him in and of himself, he doesn't necessarily have that law, but when you have this circle of people that can really then lean in and you end up trusting them, that can be part of the bigger spider web. So talk to me about Christina Coram.
Yeah, I think Christina Coram is so key to the Sean Combs case in terms of the racketeering and the criminal enterprise. And I know Sarah can talk to this, having a female lieutenant, having the person that's your deputy being a woman. With Keith Raniere, it was Nancy Salzman, right? With Jeffrey Epstein, it was Ghislaine Maxwell. And I think that that's such an important part where women, we tend to feel safer with other women when they're involved as well. And then there are the 8 predicate offences, which we'll talk to. But perhaps Sarah can say something about the female lieutenant piece. Just because another woman is involved, it doesn't mean that it's safe, right?
Sure. Yeah, that group of women were people that I really looked up to. In fact, I probably respected them more. I respected Keith's mind. I thought if he had created this curriculum, which he didn't, he stole it. But if he had, I thought he was quite brilliant, and I put him on a pedestal in that way. But I wasn't attracted to him. I was more drawn to and wanted to be like the women that he had in the organization. We mentioned Ghislaine and Jeffrey, and also like Sheila and Osho from Rajneeshpuram. Bhagwan from Wild Wild Country. This has been going on for a long time. This isn't a new thing to have a female lieutenant. I 100% underestimated their capacity to lie. They all knew about the harem and the sex. And I thought we had a close relationship. We didn't. And Pam, which is another one of his right-hand women, would reach out and say, you're in town. Did you want to see Keith? You should text him and see if he wants to go for a walk. Don't you want to get, coached by the smartest man in the world? So she would have me reach out to him or to set it up that way. So he was never pursuing me. And if it did come, like Keith wanted to spend time with me, I felt very special. So absolutely, I was groomed on all levels and all fronts.
And every time, Sarah, I remember reading your book, and every time you were about to withdraw and retract, they dangled another carrot. And it was understanding, the reward and punishment, or the carrot, the thing that you wanted, and then they would bring that in. Well, the same with Cassie and Christina. I mean, Cassie said that she talked to Christina Coram pretty much daily, and she said, I'm going to quote her, I spoke to Christina Coram nearly daily. I talked to KK a lot. She knew a lot about my personal things. And it was actually Christina who played a key role of monitoring Cassie's movements, but also these new text messages that were adduced this week by the special agent Penland, who talked to, in 2018, there were a number of texts between Cassie and Christina, where Cassie said, I can't do the violent, scary, kick me out of my own house stuff anymore. And Christina says, I'm sure, stay focused though. It's not worth derailing, that much I know. So she kept sort of marshalling Cassie. And of course, we know Christina played a key role with the video, the hotel footage, the security footage, which we all saw, where Sean Combs chased after Cassie and then beat her physically. Well, we know through Eddie Garcia's testimony that it was Christina Coram who tracked him down, kept calling, appeared in the lobby, set up a meeting with Sean Combs and with Eddie, and that it was then that $100,000 was given to Eddie by Sean Combs, who had a bank-grade money counter and was counting out the money. So Christina, this is why she plays such a key role of marshalling the women at times. She was with Sean Combs for 8 years, and he did call her his right-hand woman. She's aiding and abetting Sean Combs. She's facilitating his behavior as the head of the organization, and she's covering up a crime, because taking that video and paying money for it, that is witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and covering up a crime. And it's as simple as that. And particularly when we think about the 8 predicate offences with the RICO and criminal enterprise elements, that is a very important component. Now, we don't know whether she's going to be called for the defence, but so far she hasn't been called by the prosecution.
So going to how much she was tied to Diddy and how much they really were like two peas in a pod. There's actually a Facebook post. So he posts a photo of her on his social in 2021, and he writes, "Meet Christina Coram, Chief of Staff at Combs Enterprises. Christina, aka KK, keeps everything in my life and my business running. She's been my right hand for the last 8 years and has consistently proven to execute and get shit done. Don't know how I'd function without her."
I mean, for me, this is absolutely key, right? 8 years, she's the chief of staff. And you've got other assistants saying they were directed by her. So George Kaplan, remember his testimony? Mm-hmm. And he was saying that he was directed by her to set up the hotels, the drugs, etc. That was from her. In a civil case, there's Rodney Jones, who basically said that KK, Christina, was Ghislaine Maxwell to Sean Diddy Combs' Epstein.
Yeah. So apart from having a female co-conspirator, how much of this is just lack of understanding of actually what happened to Cassie, or it's the media influencing us because they have such a biased take? And the reason why I bring that specific up is there's a video of Bill Maher, and I can't even speak. Let's just play it because I think it will do more justice than me telling you what the video is about.
If Diddy walks free, it will be because his lawyers can point to an endless stream of text from Cassie expressing what's often called enthusiastic consent to their sex life. If you're Me Tooing someone, it doesn't help your case if you texted him, "Me too. I just want it to be uncontrollable." If you want us to think you weren't always ready to freak off, don't write, "I'm always ready to freak off."
I was so angry listening to what he had to say with his huge platform, because firstly, Cassie was before Me Too, and we saw what happened when she left him, right? We all saw it with our own eyes. So people blaming Cassie, including Bill Maher, makes me very angry. And I do think that this is just so systemic, the misogyny within all of us that victim blames and sees her as also part of the problem, when Bill Maher has a huge platform and he clearly didn't research anything to do with the case or coercive control or how difficult it is to leave Sarah. I mean, for you, it was difficult to leave, wasn't it? And you didn't have an intimate relationship with Keith Raniere.
Yes. There's two things I want to say. To see this was upsetting. And my first thought is exactly that. He didn't research. He's uninformed. And I've said this before publicly, and I'm embarrassed to say this about myself, but had I not gone through what I'd gone through, I don't know how I would have perceived this. But I also remember when, for example, with Weinstein and so many women having the same experience of going up to the hotel room, I remember thinking, had I not gone through my experience, I may not have understood that. For example, I'm going to just go to Weinstein just for a second. People don't understand that it wasn't just like, hey, come up to the hotel room. Harvey's going to meet you there. It was, for example, Rose McGowan. I don't know if you read her book, but it's amazing. And she talks about a meeting set up by her manager. She was meeting in the lobby for lunch, and he was running late. And his assistant says, he's just running late. Let's meet up in the suite. And she's with somebody. So it's like happening in stages. It feels safe. Her managers or her agent set it up. She's going up there. Do you know what I mean? So like when you have all those pieces, you can see how she could get herself into that situation, and she's not dumb. It's just the industry. And the fact that Bill Maher didn't research and said that so blatantly for laughs, it's just, it was a real gut punch, and it was really nauseating. And I'd love for him to have a pivot, was what I really love to see now, is for him to pivot and to apologize and say, hey, I made a mistake. I didn't understand coercive control. I didn't understand that a victim could comply for safety reasons and say what the person needs to say. If someone were to look at my text messages between me and Lauren in the weeks leading up to leaving, it would look like I was on board.
Oh.
I was, yeah. And some of these things are seen in the vow where I'm like, can't wait to see you. Love, love, love. And I was supposed to be at the coach summit where the next round of brandings were to take place. And we decided to go business as usual to not draw attention to the fact that I was waking up and I was out. So even the phone conversations you hear with me and Lauren where I'm asking questions, it looks like I'm trying to understand. I already know. I'm just playing along so that she doesn't ring the alarm that I'm a defector. So we don't know what anyone's thinking when they're texting complicit or complying or affirmative or positive messages. I just got to do what I got to do to stay alive and figure out how I'm going to get my shit together, which for me was happening for months before I left. Going along with it and going, this is crazy, and like trying to figure out how to blow it up internally this is way before I even left.
Thank you for highlighting that, because that's so important. Even if you were ready to leave, you're still sending nice text messages. And people want to just be like, well, if you send a nice text message, it must mean that you have warm feelings for them. So the fact that you highlighted that you were still sending these text messages all the way up to a couple of weeks before you were leaving after 12 years, like, I really want to make sure that people hear that, because it isn't as black and white, as simple as people think it is.
Yeah, I mean, 9 times out of 10, as Sarah described, it's about management. And other people don't have that full context. But it's also, I go back to my quote, when fear is in the room, consent is not. So women do this all the time, managing men. And this is the problem of men when they're not educated, having such a big microphone and audience, right? They're talking for them, they're not talking for women. And why doesn't he judge Sean Combs or the men who do this to women? Why was his whole monologue really geared to telling women what to do? That's the bit that makes me angry, of why does it always fall to, oh, you women do this or do that, and we're not going to infantilize you, but you're the one who has to leave. Well, Cassie did leave, and look what happened to her. We saw it. Often women stay because it's too dangerous to leave, and 76% of women are murdered by an abusive man at the point of separation. And I can't underline that enough. Many women stay because it's too dangerous to go. As Sarah was biding her time to find the exit strategy, not wanting to be a defector, because there would be a repercussion. There would be a backlash on you and Nippy, and there wasn't there? They said that you were the crazy one, so there's a fear of consequence, and that's important for us to understand.
Mm-hmm. And we did see that with the other defectors. There's a group of women who left in 2009, and they were sued into oblivion. And after I left, we were right. Claire Bronfman flew to Vancouver and tried to get me arrested on completely trumped up charges. But had the Vancouver police not been so savvy or, done their due diligence, I could be in jail.
Such an important point.
Yeah.
The fear of consequence is real. And also men with deep pockets, the lawsuits, when they use, I'm going to call it lawfare, against the true victim, and it can be you that gets criminalized. And we see that with domestic abuse and coercive control. And you were one of the key whistleblowers. So it's so important we hear from people like you, because it came at great cost, but thank goodness you did it. I mean, that was an incredible thing to go in and speak to the FBI and tell them what was going on after you had been branded.
I appreciate that, Laura. And I want to say that obviously I left with a lot of shame and embarrassment for having fallen for it or being duped or, missing the red flags and all that. But because I wasn't as hurt, I guess, and I don't want to say it's not like the trauma Olympics. Yes, I had trauma, but when I look at the other women, I'm trying to speak for them as best as I can, because I know that many of them just don't want to and never will.
I think though, by you speaking out and Cassie taking, a stand and really putting herself out there, that is what's going to make real change. Cassie's bravery, Jane's bravery, Mia's bravery, your bravery of coming on this show and speaking out will hopefully echo to other women who feel dismissed, who don't feel heard, who don't feel seen. So please continue on this journey. You're amazing. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, so Laura, there's one thing about a lot of guys saying this. Maybe it's because they just don't understand, they don't know what it's like to be a woman, but also women are saying this. And I actually pulled a comment from one of our past episodes from this series. And she said, based on Cassie's testimony, it seems like she is more guilty than Diddy. Honestly, she comes off as the mastermind behind these FOs. She was the one planning them. If she was the one planning the FOs, wouldn't that make her the trafficker and not him?
Absolutely not. And I go back to the video which was shown at the start of the trial, and we all saw it in May 2024, that she was very clearly the victim. She tried to leave him, he chased after her, and he physically assaulted her. And she then was the one who received all the text messages from him hounding her. And we heard testimony about that this week. He flips the script and he Davos her. He denies and attacks her credibility and reverses the victim and offender role. We've talked about it before. But the text messages that he was sending her saying, don't leave me, don't abandon me, I need your help, I have 6 children, please help me. And then she's the one who's helping him. So I can very clearly see the coercive control and the physical abuse and the coercion. And that's what's needed to prove the sex trafficking offences. It's much easier to blame the woman, isn't it, than it is to focus on the perpetrator, because all the perpetrator demands of us is our silence. That's all he demands from us, and most people are silent and they collude with him. The person who wrote that comment is colluding with him in those moments. But the victim, she demands us to hear her, see her, and take action on her behalf, and that's much harder, isn't it? But that's why we're doing this series.
Okay, so we're going to go through the 8 predicate offences. So being number 1, sex trafficking, you feel currently the prosecution has demonstrated accurately that, yes, there was sex trafficking and racketeering.
Yeah, I think, when we break down the RICO and criminal enterprise charge specifically, because this one has got the life sentence, right? So this one's important, and this is the one most people, even the legal commentators, don't seem to understand. And it's that you have a head of an organisation, well, that was Keith Raniere, that was R. Kelly, and now it's Sean Combs. You have an entourage, and people within your entourage, your organisation, help you to facilitate crime and or cover it up. And sex trafficking is one that we've heard about. That's a standalone charge against him, but it's also one of the 8 predicate. And this is where you have commercial sex, right, which we've heard about. And it's not necessarily about money, it's about something of value. So the commercial sex, we heard from Jane, it was about paying the rent. She felt obligated to him to have these hotel nights, she called them freak-offs, because he was going to give her money, $10,000 to pay the rent. So she felt obligated. With Cassie, she did it to please him. Both women thought they were in a monogamous relationship with him, right? They both thought it was a loving relationship. They're trying to please him, then he does all these other terrible things of cheating on them, but also threatening to release those tapes. So the other component is commercial sex, but also where there is force or fraud or coercion. And we've heard all about that through Cassie's testimony and the physical component that he physically beat her and other women when they didn't comply with him. And this is one that has also a maximum charge of 15 years if he's found guilty of the standalone sex trafficking charge. And the bribery components are he was going to release the tapes, right, if Cassie didn't comply. And we heard from Regina, Cassie's mum, that Cassie had sent the email saying he's going to release 2 tapes, one on Christmas Day, and he may physically harm me. He threatened to harm me and Kid Cudi, right? So that bribery component, well, with Sarah and NXIVM, it was collateral, that they had to either send naked photos or tell a big secret, something that they were fearful or ashamed of, and Keith Raniere held that as collateral. So I'm running the parallels because I think it's so important people understand there's already a blueprint, right? It already exists. So the predicate offences are very important. We've heard about sex trafficking, we've heard about bribery. The forced labour was Mia, working for 5 nights on the trot, having a physical and mental breakdown, having to be in his eye line all the time, not being allowed to lock her bedroom door, not being allowed to, wherever they were in her home or even when they travelled, she was very much submissive to him.
Well, I actually have a story. So Mia is her pseudonym, just in case people don't know. So she testified that in 2014, Diddy was eating spaghetti and demanded Mia that she go out and pick up food from IHOP for his entourage. Mia was on her period and had been working since 8 a.m. So she went to the restroom in order to change her tampon. This really bothered Combs, who allegedly went on a long rant about how he told Mia to leave immediately and not go to the room first. This is a quote: "I was bleeding down my leg and I asked to change my tampon. He threw a bowl of spaghetti at me and chased me out. The next day, she was once again suspended without pay."
It's horrific, right? She's being paid $50,000 a year. This is just, the forced labour components, but it will also come down to whether she's a credible witness to the jurors. So some of these predicate offences, they stand on their own, and it's about the receipts and the invoices and Diddy booking airfare, which we'll come to regarding transportation to engage in prostitution. But with others, it hangs on the credibility of the witness and whether the jury believe what she's saying. I mean, listening to what Mia had to deal with and put up with, and the converse of that she's also posting on social media, he's a legend, an inspiration, right? We have to also remember celebrity here and the ecosystem of Sean Diddy Combs. The two things, both of them can be true, right? The allure of Diddy, the access to him, the everything he represents, of him also being generous when it suited him and being a good person, charismatic when it suited him, but when it didn't suit him, here's the Jekyll and Hyde. Here's how he behaved to her. So both things can be true.
Yeah, Jane actually testified that all of Diddy's abuse and all the things that had happened to her, and then as soon as Cassie's lawsuit came out and she read it, she said after that, Diddy all of a sudden was polite, kind, reliable, showed up on time. So to your point, both can be true. He can be abusive, sadistic, manipulative, controlling, and yet he can also be kind, generous, sweet, charismatic.
Right, and this is what we talk about with domestic abusers and coercive controllers. It's the Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah,
they sort of have a public face and the private face, and when things don't go their way, that's the true measure of who they are.
Yeah. Okay, so we've spoken about sex trafficking. So we've got bribery. To your point, Eddie Garcia took the stand. He said that he was actually paid $100,000 in a brown paper bag to give over the last and supposedly only video that exists of him hitting and abusing Cassie in the hotel. So it seems like a bit of a clear cut.
We have to remember Christina Karan was present. She's the one that orchestrated that meeting. So when we talk about the predicate offences and racketeering and criminal enterprise, one person in the organisation who facilitates the crime and or covers it up. Well, this is the cover-up. Sean Combs had a high-grade bank counting machine. I mean, to me, that talks of organised crime, right? And in fact, the Hollywood Reporter, there was a great article by a Rob Shooter, who was his PR guru, who also talked about the environment where Sean Combs, you know, when he went in to meet with him at his home, and he'd gone into many celebrity houses, he had to go through a metal detector. There were men with guns and blank expressions. And for me, this smacks of the hostile environment, the organised crime, that even when we go back to Mia, she's in an environment where men are carrying guns, there's lots of guns. That's a message to her, isn't it?
So now we mentioned forced labour. So we spoke about obviously Mia's testimony about being on her period and him throwing spaghetti at her. We've got Capricorn Clark, who worked days and days, and then this kind of goes under the forced labour, where she was making $65,000 a year, but she was working so much. She goes to HR and she's like, you know, is this accurate? They realised they owed her $80,000 in overtime. In overtime, she took that piece of paper to Sean and he ripped it up in front of her. So if that is to be believed, I don't understand how else you could see this apart from, yes, he's guilty of forced labour.
And I'd bring Cassie in there as well, of the element that she said the freak-offs were like a job to her, i.e. she wasn't producing music, it was like a job and she had to perform.
I actually have a quote, the freak-offs became a job. There was no time to do anything else but do them and then try to recover.
And Jane said similarly, she said, I felt it was an obligation, I knew he was paying my rent, and then there were text messages to him saying, I'm not a porn star, I'm not an animal, I need a break. So those elements could come under there, but I think there are stronger ones which the prosecution have adduced through multiple witnesses.
Okay, so then let's go to witness tampering.
Well, this is about proving the elements of RICO, racketeering and criminal enterprise.
So it all strings down.
Yeah, so you've got to remember they only need 2 of these, right? So we've already said sex trafficking, bribery, forced labour. You only need 2. And it's one person who's in his organisation who's assisting him and facilitating the crime and or cover-up. So we're going through the 8, and I think this is the bit that most people don't understand. And the RICO and criminal enterprise, this is one charge against him, but it carries a sentence of life. So this is the real heavy hitter here. This is a lot that's at stake. And the witness tampering element, you know, do you remember when Capricorn Clark testified? She said that Sean Combs wanted to kill Kid Cudi, but had also said that he mustn't report to the police. If he reports to the police, then Sean Combs would kill Cassie and Capricorn Clark. That's witness tampering. That's interfering. It's obstruction of justice.
So Jane this week actually testified that when things started coming out and Diddy was getting arrested and he was trying to somewhat allegedly cover up, he left her a message and he said, hey, I don't want to be blowing up your phone. Let me know when I can get 10 minutes to talk. Just need my memory jogged on some things.
Well, I mean, for me, this is an important context and part of the regrooming and manipulation. Much as he did with Cassie, right? Sending all these text messages after he's beaten her, turning up at Kerry Morgan's house, banging on the door, trying to see Cassie, and all the text messages, you know, don't abandon me, I need you, and not wanting police involvement. We've got a pattern here of behaviour, and the prosecution have adduced this, but it's a very blurry picture because there's been so many other confusing points with this trial, right? And I'll include the juror issue being removed, I'll include Kanye West appearing, but for me, this again is about regrooming and manipulation. And then Jane, as she said, you know, she still loved him. It was a loving relationship and, you know, a challenging witness too, because she's still having a rent paid by him, but he's also paying for her attorney. And I think this is another component. It could go either way, that she is still in the spider's web of coercive control, and it shows his manipulation and, you know, how powerful he is, that he has total mind control, even now, of Jane.
Yeah, God. So then the next one is transportation to engage for prostitution.
Yeah, this is a big one. We've heard from the Punisher, we've heard from other sex workers who were paid, and they were paid by Sean Combs. But I think that this is really wrapped up very succinctly by Special Agent Penland's testimony, where the special agent talks specifically to receipts of airfares where Sean Combs paid himself for the return trip airfare for Jules Theodore to travel from LA to New York. That's proven, right? It's within receipts and it's Sean Combs who's paid. But the other elements that come under transport to engage for prostitution, and this carries a maximum of 10 years, are what's called Mann Act violations. Now the Mann Act violations, and it is a bit dry, but it's that someone knowingly was transported. So a person knowingly transported a person to engage in prostitution. And the other element is that there was intention to engage in prostitution. Now, what's critical about this, if we just take Jules Theodore, where money was paid for an airfare and there was engagement in prostitution, there doesn't have to be force or fraud or coercion for the elements to be proven, and consent is not a defence under this particular predicate offence. So the whole matter about consent goes out the window. And this is probably the easiest charge to prove. What is the element that they have to prove, and have they met it? And for me, yes, they have.
Because you basically have the receipts. There's no getting around the receipts. It's not he said, she said, it's not emotional, it's
correct.
Basic fact-based.
Correct. I mean, if we add in the Punisher, do you remember he said that Sean Combs was recording Cassie and him engaging in sexual acts, but he stopped the camera at one point and he went and threw money on the bed and said, more of this, more of this. Well, here you've got direct testimony that Sean Combs paid. So this is another very important component, and consent is not a defence under the Mann Act violation. And it's also what Keith Raniere and R. Kelly were successfully prosecuted and convicted on.
One more little bit before we move off this. Sometimes I understand I'm not in your world, so there's a little bit of confusion. So help me think through this. I thought transportation to engage for prostitution and sex trafficking were young little girls being stuffed under, you know, like in a hood of a car, driven over a border. But this, where it's like, it is somewhat consensual from, and I understand you said that has nothing to do with it, but if you're
not under the Mann Act violation.
Okay, under
so
that.
that's very specific under the predicate.
Got it. Because I just think if you're an adult, if you choose to engage in sexual activities, if someone offers to pay you to travel and you say yes, I don't know, again, I'm trying to be delicate, but trying to be honest as well. How is that a problem for Diddy? Like, why is that he should go to prison for it if the prostitute was willing to. The prostitute said, yes, you can give me money. The prostitute said, yes, I will travel. Like, help me actually understand that.
Well, it comes down to Cassie and Jane, doesn't it? That they didn't want these freak-offs all of the time. You can consent 5 times and then you withdraw your consent. The moment you withdraw your consent, that's the offence of sex trafficking, that you're being moved across state lines and there's a commercial element to it and there's fraud, force or coercion. And with Cassie there was. He said that he was going to release the videos if she didn't do what he said. So she withdrew her consent multiple times.
Okay, someone's going to push back because there was one text message, I actually don't have the exact quote in front of me, but there was one text message where he says, do I have your consent? And she says yes. So talk to me, people are going to push back now, say yes, but there was text messages. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, so for that one occasion where she said, yes, I'm consenting, that's one occasion. She's not saying I consent for the rest of my life. You know, when women have a relationship with a man, we're not saying we consent to have sex for the rest of our lives, right? So this is also the kind of the grooming where when we get married, if you take the traditional vows, love, honor and obey, there's lots of people who think that that means that a man has a right to have sex with you, even if you're asleep. That is not true. Okay, marital rape became a criminal offence in the UK in 1992. So you can consent 5 times and then withdraw your consent. That's still rape. And Cassie engages to begin with because she wants to please him and she doesn't want her to be replaced by somebody else. But then she doesn't agree. And remember Deontay Nash's testimony where he said she told him she did not want to do these freak-offs. So now you've got a third-party testimony. I believe he was credible. And that backs up what Cassie said.
You got me a little emotional because my ex-boyfriend did do that when I was sleeping and I've never considered that. I'm a bit stunned right now.
Well, I'm sorry, Lisa, because that is effectively rape. And many women don't see it as that because you think when you're in a relationship, but if you have not consented, that is rape. And I'm really sorry to hear that. I can see how much that has brought up for you. And I know this conversation will bring things up. And, you know, this is the reality of what happens to women. We think when we're in one thing that we are therefore giving of ourselves to that person and we don't want to upset them. But when we're asleep, we can't actively consent. The challenge with a lot of the rape offences all across the world is that consent isn't a component. So you think about Giselle Pellicot, we talked about her before in France, where she's being drugged and sedated, and then he's bringing men in to rape her. She can't consent when she's asleep. Neither could you. So I'm so sorry that that happened, because even your reaction, you know it was wrong.
I kind of told myself, like, but once I woke up, I could have told him to get off.
But whilst he was in the act of,
Ooh,
he's in the middle of it.
To take up that turn, yeah.
Right, and to respect your partner, you ask. You know, that is what a respectful relationship is, where you love, trust and respect your partner. And therefore, you want them to be conscious. You know, and I do have a question mark about any man who wants to have sex, rape a woman who's asleep. Because that's almost akin to necrophilia, right? Necrophilia is raping a dead body. Mm-hmm. And when somebody wants to have sex with someone who's not conscious, that is highly problematic. That is a paraphilia in and of itself, because it's not normal behaviour. You normally want a response, it's reciprocal, right? But when you're asleep, you cannot consent.
This is why I do the content. Because even now, it's like the fact that you said that and it just hit me, I was like, how has this never dawned on me before? And I think about, I've done a lot of research. I think I'm a pretty smart woman, and yet I still had that belief. Makes this episode and this show even more important, because we have to break the understanding and the conditioning.
But breaking the silence is so important.
Yeah.
Even you sharing that, breaking the silence, because there will be hundreds of other women out there that's happened to. And because we're groomed to be compliant and to appease our partner, right, girls and women, that we appease them, and therefore we push down our own needs and often desires because we're focused on appeasing them.
You know what's interesting? Shit, this is all just hitting me. When I first met Tom and we first started to sleep together, I said to him dead straight, I was like, if you ever touch me when I'm sleeping, I will never date you again. And it's interesting that I put that boundary. Like, I knew it was wrong, but I'd never really acknowledged the intensity and how bad that was. And I think being able to acknowledge now that, hey, this is wrong, allows you to then have the strength and the confidence to now stand up for yourself. And that's why this show and this episode and you being here is so important, because we have to start breaking that understanding. Thank you for taking me through that. I appreciate it.
Well done you, because you did assert that boundary to Tom as well.
Yeah, I did.
So you did advocate for yourself. Something within you knew that that was wrong. And like I said, you just sharing that in the moment will help many others, because when we use our voice, we help somebody else to identify it and then to heal. And that healing process, our body will always keep the score. And it comes out in other ways when we hold on to these things.
I wasn't sure if I should say it. When you said it, I felt so stunned, and I was like, I don't want to make this about me, but thank you. I really do hope. That's why I'm trying, whenever I possibly can, be as vulnerable as possible, because it's important. It's important. And I'm 45. I'm 45 and all of this is just hitting me. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now if we can go on to the next. So we've got kidnapping. Capricorn Clark testified about having her life repeatedly threatened by Combs and how he told her he wanted to kill rapper Kid Cudi. She detailed being taken by an enraged gun-wielding Combs to break into Kid Cudi's home. She told the court she went with Combs on the day of the break-in at Kid Cudi's house because she felt she could be hurt if she refused. She was taken against her will.
Yes, and so the prosecution made sure that Capricorn Clark's testimony was very clear around the kidnap point, that he came very early in the morning, banging down her door. She's in her, sleepwear. He's got a gun. And just as you described, did she have a choice? And I don't believe she did. Even though he might not be pointing it to her head and he's saying, I want to kill Kid Cudi, and she has to go with him. And everything that transpired thereafter, her testimony along with Kid Cudi, they corroborate each other, right? So these elements, kidnapping and the arson, we've got to remember with Kid Cudi, we had the Molotov, we heard about the Molotov cocktail.
Yeah, that's the next one is arson,
yeah. So these two go hand in hand, and they're very much reliant on whether Capricorn Clark and Kid Cudi came across as credible, and can the jury make the leap that given that the arson investigator in LAPD, I think it was LAPD, the officer who testified, said that when he turned up at Kid Cudi's residence, he saw a car leaving, and he clocked it because it was out of place. He did the vehicle registration check. It was registered to Sean Combs, his company, right? So you can join these dots together, and the closing for the prosecution, they have to join these dots together, and it will rest on whether the jury think that they're credible. To me, they are, and I can make that leap very clearly because you've got two independent witnesses. They were very specific in what they talked to. That wasn't sensationalist. Their testimony wasn't all over the place. It was very specific to prove these elements. But there wasn't prima facie evidence of sorts. But we did have, remember the email that Cassie sent Regina, saying in December that not only was Sean Combs going to release 2 videos, he also threatened to harm Cassie and Kid Cudi. And we heard about Sean Combs threatening to arson Kid Cudi, and then boom, his car explodes. Can we make this leap? I can. Based on the evidence and the triangulation of it, will the jury? That's the question.
Yeah, that's one of the things that concerns me a little, in the sense of if you've got 8 men up there, they don't understand what it's like to be a woman and feel the fear that we women have. If you ask a man, if you just ask my husband, what do you do when you leave at night to go out? He's like, I grab my keys and I leave. What do you mean? As a woman, you make sure that you've got your phone, that your phone's charged, that you've got an escape route if you're going somewhere, that you don't go alone in a dark alley. These are all absolute concerns that we live with on a daily basis. So when you hear someone like a very famous wealthy man who's your boss turns up, doesn't have to be pointing a gun at you, as a woman you get that fear. Do men?
No. And that's why the education piece is so important in our shoes, right? That's why the Bill Maher monologue is so important.
Right.
Because often it is men who are the commentators. Trey Lovell is a civil lawyer, And he was brought on, I think it was ABC, and just this week gave an interview, and he talked about the video where Cassie was being beaten in the hotel, and he said, well, is this just a relationship gone south? I mean, I couldn't believe that that's how he was describing it and just normalising such violence and brutality. Most women see that and we recoil, and we feel the fear. We feel, you know, Cassie in the fetal position, she's been there before. Has that lawyer ever been in that position? No. He clearly has no idea. And, you know, for me, I've worked with thousands of women, and that fear is real. And so we have to really take it back to, you know, conversations like this that really reflect many women's experiences and educate those men. Because all it takes is the good men to say shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking, if we have really good men speaking on women's behalf as well, I think it will make a difference whether we like it or not. To your point, it didn't even dawn on me that the Bill Maher thing would have even extra impact because he's a guy, but you're so right. And you pointed out, by the way, the guy yelling in the background. Yeah. The guy goes, woohoo!
Whooping. It made my blood boil because, you know, who is that guy? He thinks this is a really, you know, important point, and yeah, go rapists, go men who harm women. You know, and I always say it because people say not all men, but it's that man in the audience, it's Bill Maher, it's Trey Lovell, it's all these men who collude with by not understanding. And then you've got all those who are silent, right, who say nothing. And I'll say it again, silence colludes with the perpetrator, and all women feel it when people look the other way and say nothing and do nothing. And again, it goes back to the criminal enterprise. Because of Sean Combs being who he was, there were many people in his orbit who looked the other way. Remember Kerry Morgan, who talked about Cassie being beaten up, and she said to Ruben, the security guard, help her, and he looks the other way. That's colluding with Sean Combs. That's part of the criminal enterprise, that his boss is Sean Combs, he turns the other way. That's a criminal offence. He's just turned and looked the other way. What's the message to Cassie and Kerry Morgan? The message is it's okay for him to do this. It normalises it. And so those so-called good men, they are now part of the problem. So we need all men speaking out and educating themselves, because there are a lot of good men. And as Sarah said, even women don't always understand. So that's why, you know, the work I do really is, it's life-changing and life-saving. And every time we speak out, we help another woman.
So we went over the kidnapping, the arson. To your point, it feels like it's very cut and dry, but again, if we're relying on the testimony, you never know, it's not a guarantee. And then the last one we've got is the drug distribution.
Yeah, and we've heard about drugs the whole way through the trial, right? Of Cassie taking them to anaesthetize herself to be able to do those horrific freak-offs. But we've also heard about Sean Combs taking lots of drugs. I mean, there was even the suggestion about the MDMA, him having a bad batch when he beat up Cassie. You know, it's been threaded throughout, him being a drug addict and so on. But the drug distribution, we've heard very clearly from George Kaplan, say the assistant, that Christina Karam told him to set up, instructed him to set up the hotels, and also the drugs. Right. We've also heard from Cassie say that Christina Karam was the person who told her how to hide drugs in her luggage and put them on a plane. That's distribution of drugs. We also heard from Jonathan Perez, another assistant, who said that he also set up the hotel nights and the drugs, but he said he did it as a favour to Sean Combs, that it wasn't part of the business. I mean, do me a favour, you know, and I think this is an important point where the prosecution pushed back and said, so did you do that whilst you're on vacation, whilst you're on holiday? And he said no. So therefore it's part of the criminal enterprise, it's part of the business, right? So when drugs are being procured and it's his staff who are doing that, we go back to racketeering and criminal enterprise. We just need one person who is helping facilitate the crime and or covering it up.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through them again, and I want you to say whether yes or no, in high conviction, whether it's been proved or not. Sex trafficking, racketeering.
For me, yes.
Bribery.
Yes.
Forced labour.
Yes.
Witness tampering.
Yes.
Transportation to engage for prostitution.
Yes, the special agent alone, just their testimony.
Kidnapping.
Yes, I do believe Capricorn Clark.
Arson.
Yes, I do believe the Molotov cocktail was a targeted offence and it was to send a message, and it was Sean Combs that was behind it. He didn't do it himself, he used somebody else. So we go back to racketeering, criminal enterprise.
And drug distribution.
I gave 3 examples. So yes, and I'm laser focused,
Yeah.
so I can see what the prosecution have done, and Maureen Comey leading the prosecution, and I don't feel that they have overcooked it, right? But I know the defence will be saying, look, he's a bad guy. He did these terrible things. He beat Cassie, terrible boyfriend, but he's not into racketeering and sex trafficking. That's mobland stuff, right? And that's the narrative I keep hearing other legal commentators say, that they just can't see it. And I'm just going to say this last point, is that I believe that lots of people wanted to be on the jury because they thought they'd hear from lots of celebrities. And also lots of people thought with the trial they would hear from lots of celebrities, and therefore they're like, oh, the prosecution haven't delivered, they haven't brought the case. But when you look at the legal standard of the case, and that's all I'm interested in at this point, is the legal standard of the case. Have they proved those elements? The 5 charges, the 8 predicate offences, they only need 2. One person helping him within his organisation. He's the head of the organisation, just like R. Kelly was, just like Keith Raniere. I can see that blueprint, and I don't think the prosecution have overcooked it at all. They've gone in with a very narrow focus.
All right, well, as always, we're going to follow along. Laura, where can people find you, your amazing podcast and everything that you're doing?
So Crime Analyst, which has just won another award.
Yes,
so I want to thank all my listeners. Thank you.
You text me from England. I had a photo of you. I loved that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's huge.
It was, because it was from my listeners, from the community, and that matters far more to me. So please do, my people who don't listen to me yet, please do listen to Crime Analyst. Join the Crime Analyst squad on Patreon, patreon.com/Crime Analyst. Lots more insight and analysis there. Plus I do ringleader live events, bringing in other experts. And I'm across all the social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, under Crime Analyst.
Oh, you're changing lives, girl. You're changing lives. Guys, please smash that subscribe button. We are covering the Diddy series every single week to make sure that we are learning from everything that we're hearing so that no woman ever freaking gets stuck. Guys, thank you so much for joining. Until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace. To learn more about how Diddy got away with all the lies and abuse and manipulation for absolute decades, then click right here, right now. Drugs, sex, control, all masked as love. She said yes when she wanted to scream no. Even on her birthday,